know that there are people out there who demand a certain level of pathos or ironclad internal logic in order to enjoy an episode of Doctor Who, but let's be real with ourselves for a second. If you're on a show about a time-traveling alien in a dimensionally transcendental phone box and you can't dedicate a solid 45 minutes to simple, pure, absurd novelty, then you're doing something wrong. That's not to say that's all there is to Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, but yeah, the fact that they chose that to be the title of the episode itself should tell you how much this thing only exists because someone wanted to get this concept on screens. The Doctor gets word of a big old spaceship about to crash into Earth in the year 2367 and gathers up Amy, Rory, and a couple other recently made pals to investigate. Oh, and also Rory's dad, Brian. He's here. Naturally, what do we find on this spaceship but dinosaurs? And at first, not much else. Until the gang has to discover what exactly the deal is, while also turning the ship around before it can crash or explode. In a show like this, I find it hard not to empathize when the characters themselves are just having boatloads of fun, and in this episode we've got most of our cast just having a ball. The Doctor is predictably giddy as a kid in a candy shop to find something new and interesting, Brian is swept up in a first-time trip aboard the TARDIS, Amy is loving standing in for the Doctor, and big game hunter Riddell is just showing off. Rory and Queen Nefertiti of Egypt serve as the straight men for their respective trios once they get split up into groups of 3, but even they get moments of feel-good triumph. Chibnall is tackling yet another family relationship in the form of Rory and Brian, but in contrast to 42, the Williams bonding is more understated and common. There isn't some huge schism between them like there was with Martha and her family, but there is a gap in their ability to relate with each other that's quickly bridged when they each display some utility. They both provide a grounded human element to an otherwise very outlandish story, but even then they both get great comedic bits when they bounce off the Doctor. The biggest and most interesting aspect of this episode, however, has got to be its villain. David Bradley plays Solomon, and he's where the tonal balance of the episode comes from. Thanks to him, it feels like a legitimate adventure and not a complete farce. In an otherwise light and fluffy setup, Solomon is one of the most utterly despicable personalities to ever grace this series outside of Big Finish audio dramas. I don't even think the guy's around for half the episode, but in that short time we see he's an utterly shameless thief, mass murderer, human trafficker, and attempted rapist. He's such a complete antithesis to the Doctor, but what makes it worse is the pride he takes in it. Through all of his scenes, you get the sense he genuinely believes there's not a single thing in the universe that means more than his own profit. I mean, let's look at the first big action he takes in the episode. The Doctor shows up and Solomon assumes he's a medical doctor, so he asks him to help fix his legs. Right off the bat, the Doctor seems almost partial to the guy and would have likely helped in a heartbeat, but the moment he asks a relatively innocuous question,
"Tell me how you came by so many dinosaurs."
Injure the older one.
What?
the sheer flippancy in the face of a perceived threat to his business is pretty striking. Villains who are out for strictly monetary gain isn't anything new to Doctor Who, but the extent to which Solomon is such a loathsome individual actually makes me kinda sad that we killed him off. I'd love to see the Doctor combat a personification of greed this extreme more often. Because of the way this thing is structured, it's essentially got 7 main characters including our villain, and that all of them feel like they got just the right amount to do is a feat. That really speaks to the pace of the episode. It feels like it's flying by, but by the time we reach the end, I don't get the impression I just watched something short or unsubstantial. Honestly, I'm already starting to run out of things to say on account of just how straightforward this episode is. This is, in almost every way, the primo example of a fun bit of fluff, with just enough elements to keep one engaged and very little beyond that needed to justify its own existence. What this means is that however shallow the good might be, there's not really any room for any bad to overshadow it. Except, ironically, Solomon's robot cronies, which are lame.
Take us to your leader.
Really?
Too good to resist.
Hey, at least he didn't say I've always wanted to say that for the 3rd time. Not counting Cold Blood as its own story, I surprisingly find Dinosaurs on a Spaceship the weakest of Chibnall's Doctor Who offerings. It's got a neat concept and a great villain, but for the most part it's exactly the kind of story that chugs along at a good but not spectacular speed and is content to let you watch these fun characters do fun things without pushing any deeper ideas at you.